A Pair of Schoolgirls by Angela Brazil. Chapter 9. Dorothy Scores. Dorothy and Allison met next morning with a shade of embarrassment on either side. Dorothy was a little ashamed of herself for having accepted her friend's invitation without leave from Aunt Barbara, and not particularly proud of her experiences on the way home. She had at first been inclined to tell Allison about her adventure, then she decided it would be rather humiliating to have to explain that she had forgotten her contract, that she had had no money in her pocket, and that the official had not seemed disposed to trust her for her fare. Allison, whose path in life was always smooth, would perhaps scarcely understand the situation, and it might not reflect altogether to her own credit. Therefore, she did not even mention that she had missed the 6:5 train, and after a hurried greeting buried herself in her books, trying to gather some idea of her lessons, which had been much neglected the night before. Allison, on her side, was relieved that Dorothy did not refer to her visit to Lindenlea. She was most anxious to avoid the subject of her invitation. She felt it would be extremely awkward to be obliged to tell Dorothy point-blank that her mother refused to endorse it, and, mindful of the prohibition against too great intimacy, she left her schoolfellow her books, and made no advances. The two walked from his station to the college almost in silence, each occupied with her own thoughts, and though they met frequently during the day, and travelled back together as usual, they only talked about ordinary Avondale topics. Each felt as warm towards the other as before, but both realized that theirs must be a friendship entirely confined to school, and not brought into their home lives. Dorothy, though she was far too proud to hint at the matter, easily divined that Mrs. Clark had disapproved of Allison's action in taking her to the house, and that she did not mean to give her any future invitation. That hurt her on a sore spot. "She thinks me a nobody," she groaned to herself. "If I had been Hope Lawson, now, or even Val Barnett, I'm sure I should have been asked. Allison hasn't even mentioned the tableaux again. I suppose she's not allowed to lend me the costume. Well, I don't care, I'll wear something else." But she did care, not only about this, but about many things that happened in class. It is not pleasant to be unpopular, and in several ways Dorothy was having a hard term. Hope Lawson, who had never been very friendly at any time, seemed to have completely turned against her, and was both supercilious and disagreeable. Hope did not like Dorothy, whose blunt, downright ways and frank speech were such a contrast to her own easy flippancy. Money, position, and pretty clothes were what Hope worshipped, and because Dorothy possessed none of these she looked down upon her, and lost no opportunity of slighting her. In her capacity of warden, Hope naturally had much influence in the class, and led popular opinion. It was very unfortunate that she had been elected, for she was quite the wrong girl to fill a post which involved a tolerable amount of moral responsibility. The tone of a form is a subtle, intangible thing, It means certain codes of schoolgirl honor, certain principles of right and wrong, certain standards of thought and views of life, all of which need keeping at a high level. Under Hope's rule, the upper fourth began to show a general slackness, rules were evaded where possible, work was shirked, and a number of undesirable elements crept in. Though Hope, to curry favour, made a great fuss of Miss Pittman to her face, she was not loyal to her behind her back. She would often mimic her and make fun of her to raise a laugh among the girls. Hope encouraged the idea that a mistress was the natural enemy of her pupils, and that they were justified in breaking rules if they could do so safely. She did not even draw the line sometimes at a white lie. Her motto was, "Keep pleasant with your teacher on the surface, but please yourself when she can't see you, and do anything you like, so long as you're not caught." One morning when Dorothy came into the classroom, she found Hope seated on her desk, exhibiting a new ring to a group of admiring friends. Dorothy paused a moment, then, as nobody moved, she protested. "I'll thank you to clear off. I want to get to my desk." Hope giggled. "I'll thank you to wait a little, then." "I mean to stay where I am all the present," she said, in a mocking voice. "But you're on my desk." "Well, what if I am? A warden has the right to sit upon anybody's desk she likes." "Oh, Hope," sniggered the others. "What's the good of being warden if you can't? The post must have some advantages." "Hope Lawson, do you intend to clear off my desk?" asked Dorothy, with rising temper. "I don't know hat I do, Dorothy. I suppose your name is Greenfield." "For shame, Hope," said Grace Russell. "I'm disgusted with you. Why can't you move?" Grace enforced her words by a vigorous tug, and drew Hope away to her own place. With 2 flaming spots in her cheeks, Dorothy opened her desk. She was too angry for speech. Grace's compassionate looks hurt her almost as much as Hope's insult. She did not want pity any more than scorn. "I hardly know a word of the history," Hope was saying. "We had some friends in last night, and we were all playing Billy Rag. Do you know it? It's a new game, and it's lovely. I scarcely looked at my lessons. However, I begged a concert ticket from Father, and brought it for pity. It's Faust, at the town hall, and it's supposed to be tip-top. She'll let me off easy this morning, you'll see." "Hope, you're not fair," objected Grace. "Why not? If Pity chooses to overlook my lessons on the score of concert tickets, why shouldn't she? She's keen on going to things. Likes to show off her new dresses. I suppose I shall have to get her an invitation to the mayor's reception. By the by, who's going to the young people's ball at the town hall? It's to be a particularly good one this year." "I am, for one," said Val Barnett, "and I think a good many of the form'll be there. Helen Walker, and Joyce Hickson, and Annie Gray are asked, I know. Are you going, Dorothy? Enquired Hope, with a taunt in her tone. Dorothy never goes anywhere, laughed Blanche Hall. Dorothy buried her head in her desk and took no notice, but her silence was pain and grief to her. Hope's too mean for anything, whispered Ruth Harmon to Noel Kennedy. I'm sorry for Dorothy. And pity's too bad. It's not worthwhile preparing one's work if Hope gets all the praise for nothing. Why is pity always so hard on Dorothy? Oh, because Dorothy doesn't flatter her up. Besides, she loves presents. I wonder what she'd say if she could hear what her darling Hope says about her sometimes. I wish she'd find her out. She can't, unless someone tells, and I hate sneaks. Well, I'm really sorry for Dorothy Greenfield. Hope and her set seem to have taken a spite against her. I don't mind if her dresses are shabby, and if she's the only girl in the form who doesn't own a watch. I vote we make up a special clique to be on her side. All right, I'm your man. I admire Dorothy, she's so game, she never gives way an inch. Whatever Hope says, she just sticks her head in the air and looks proud. She flares up sometimes. Well, I don't blame her. I like a girl who won't be kept down. What could we do to boost Dorothy up a little in the form? Most of the girls are like sheep. If anyone leads hard enough, they'll follow. Well, I've an idea. Go ahead. You know Dorothy's splendid at acting. She ought to take a principal part in our Christmas play. But she can't rehearse. She's barred the gym and tied to the classroom all the rest of the term. That's my point. I think Dorothy got much too hard a punishment. Miss Tempest was angry because she answered back, and never took into account that she had owned up about going to that wedding, and that it was honest of her to tell. Yes, the storm cloud was savage because Dorothy was cheeky, but I think she's got over it a little now. She's been far nicer to her lately. Have you noticed that too? Well, I believe Miss Tempest knows she treated Dorothy severely, and she's sorry, only she doesn't like to eat her own words. My plan is that we get up a deputation, go to the study, and beg her to let Dorothy off for rehearsals. She knows what a point we make of the play. Splendiferous. I verily believe we shall succeed. Shall we go at 11? No, we must talk to the others first, and get up as big a deputation as we can. The more of us who ask, the better. The weather, which before times had never troubled Dorothy overmuch, was at present a subject of the most vital importance to her. If it were fine, she might go into the playground at 1 o'clock, but if it were wet, she was obliged to remain in durance vile in the classroom, while most of the girls were amusing themselves in the gymnasium. On this particular day it poured. Dorothy looked hopelessly out of the window to see the gravelled stretch, where the girls often practiced hockey, turned into a swamp, and a river racing under the swings. With a groan she resigned herself to the inevitable. The society of her 5 fellow victims was not particularly exhilarating, so she took a library book from her desk and began to read. As a rule, those who were free to do so left the schoolroom only too readily, but today Hope Lawson and some of her chums lingered behind. They were in a silly mood, and began drawing caricatures on the blackboard. "Watch me do, Professor Schenk," cried Hope, taking the chalk. "Here's his bald head, and his double chin, and his funny little peaked beard. Do you like it? Well, I'll draw you another." Miss Lawson's celebrated lightning sketches. "Who'll you have next?" "Do pity," said Blanche. "All right, give me the duster and I'll wipe out the professor. Now then, how's this? Here's her snubby nose, and her eyeglasses, and her fashionable fuzz of hair. She's smirking no end. Don't I look nice?" she's saying, and Hope drew a balloon issuing from the mouth of the portrait, with the words "Don't I look nice?" written inside. Then, encouraged by the laughter of her friends, she added G.R. Pittman, otherwise Pitty, over the top. Dorothy, who wished to read her story, had retired to the extreme back of the room, and sat in a corner, but she nevertheless heard all that was going on. "Yes, Pitty fancies herself," continued Hope. "You should see what costumes she comes out in for evening wear. I'm sure she's greater on toilet hints than literature. How do you make that out?" "Observation, my dear. If you could look inside her desk, you wouldn't find it full of classical authors, there'd be novels and beauty recipes instead. She keeps it locked, at any rate. Wise of her, too. If we could only open it now. Hello. She's actually forgotten to lock it today. What a joke. Let us see what she's got here." "Particularly honorable for a warden," came a voice from the other end of the room. Hope turned round angrily. "Indeed, Madam Sanctimonious. So you've grown a prig all of a sudden?" "Who asked St. Dorothy to interfere?" "Go on," Hope said Blanche, "we're not goody-goody." "Well, I mean to have a look, at any rate." "There. Didn't I tell you? The first thing I find is a novel. What a heap of papers. I believe she must keep her love letters here. Oh, girls, I say, here's a portrait of a gentleman." Blanche, Irene, and Valentine came crowding round, all sense of honor lost in their curiosity. "Oh, what a supreme joke!" they exclaimed. Now the back desks of the classroom were raised on a platform, and in the corner where Dorothy sat there was a tiny window that served the purpose of lighting the passage. From her place Dorothy that moment caught a vision. No less a person than Miss Pittman herself was walking down the corridor. Should she give a warning cave, and let the others know? She was not sure whether they deserved it. "Look here, you wouldn't be doing this if Miss Pittman could see you," she remonstrated. "Why don't you stuff those things back and shut up the desk?" "Shut up yourself, Dorothy Greenfield, and mind your own business." "On your heads be it," then muttered Dorothy. "I tried to save you, but here comes swift vengeance." At that moment through the open door walked Miss Pittman. She stopped short and surveyed the scene through her pince-nez. There was her portrait on the blackboard, not at all a flattering one, especially with the inscription issuing from her mouth, but quite unmistakably meant to represent her, for her name was written above. At her open desk were her 4 favorite pupils, giggling over the photograph which Hope held aloft. It was a disillusionment for any teacher, and Miss Pittman's mouth twitched. "What are you doing at my desk?" she asked sharply. No girls were ever so hopelessly caught. Hope remained with the photograph in her hand, staring speechlessly. Blanche tried to shuffle away, Valentine looked sulky, and Irene, always ready for tears, pulled out her pocket handkerchief. "Who has drawn this picture on the blackboard?" continued Miss Pittman. "Hope did it." "It wasn't any of us," sniveled Irene, trying to thrust the brunt of the affair onto her friend's shoulders. Miss Pittman gave Hope a scathing glance, under which the girl quailed. "An extremely clever way of showing her talent for drawing, no doubt," remarked the mistress sarcastically. "I shall be obliged if someone will clean the board." Several officious hands at once clutched the duster and erased the offending portrait. Miss Pittman walked to her desk, closed the lid, locked it, and put the key in her pocket. "It is superfluous to tell you what I think of you," she said. "Miss Tempest will have to hear about this." "Well, Hope's done for with Miss Pittman, at any rate," said Bertha Warren to Addie Parker, when the outraged mistress had taken her departure, and the 4 sinners had fled downstairs. "Yes, there'll be no more favouring now, and a good thing, too." It was time Miss Pittman's eyes were opened. Will she really tell Miss Tempest? Serve them right if she does. I'm waiting for developments. There was not long to wait. At 2 o'clock, Hope, Blanche, Irene, and Valentine received a summons to the study, and after a 10 minutes interview with the headmistress came away with red eyes. "Have you heard the news?" said Noel Kennedy presently. "There's been a most tremendous storm, a regular blizzard, in the study. Miss Tempest has been ultra-tempestuous, and Hope and the others have come out just wrecks." "What's the matter?" enquired some of the girls who had not heard of the occurrence in the classroom. Hope found Miss Pittman's desk unlocked, and she and Irene and Val and Blanche were calmly turning over the contents when Petty popped into the room and caught them. Then the squalls began. They had to report themselves in the study, and it turned out that there was something else against Hope and Blanche. "I don't know who gave them away," but somebody had been telling Miss Tempest that they were at the wedding that day. She charged them with it, and was simply furious because they hadn't owned up when she asked the class. "I can tell you who told her," volunteered Margaret Parker. "It was Professor Schenk. He saw him here, and he happened to mention it this morning." Well, Miss Tempest was fearfully stern. She said Hope wasn't fit to be warden, and to represent the lower school, if she'd no more idea of honour than that. "She's taken away the wardenship from her. She says it's not to be decided by election again, she's going to choose a girl for herself." "Whom has she chosen?" "Grace Russell," said Ruth Harmon, who at that moment joined the group. "It's just been put up on the notice board." "Well, I'm glad. Grace will make a good warden." "Yes, there's something solid about Grace. She never lets herself be carried away." "Hope will be crestfallen." "Never mind, it will do Hope Lawson good to find she's not the most important person in the form." "I say," interposed Noel, "isn't this a good opportunity to put in a word for Dorothy? She owned up when Hope didn't, so Miss Tempest ought to remember that. Let us strike while the iron is hot, and go to the study now." "Right you are. Where are Mavi and Doris?" "I'm sure they'll come too." Dorothy's champions walked boldly into the study, and put their case so successfully to Miss Tempest that she condescended to consider it. Perhaps, as Noel suspected, she thought she had given too severe a punishment, and was ready to remit it. In the end, she consented to forgive, not only Dorothy, but her companions in misfortune also, granting all 6 permission to enter the gymnasium again. "It's a complete turning of the tables," said Ruth, as the girls returned triumphantly from their mission. "Dorothy's free, and Hope and Blanche will have to stay in the classroom and do their share of penance. Then they'll be out of rehearsals." "Of course they will. And who's to take Becky Sharp?" "I vote for Dorothy." "So do I. She deserves it." "Where is she? Let's take her order of release." The events of that day had an effect upon the upper fourth in more ways than one. Perhaps Miss Pittman had learned a lesson, for in future she accepted no presents at all from her pupils, not even flowers, and showed special favor to nobody. The form liked her much better now that she was more impartial. "I can't stand a teacher who pets one girl and snubs another," said Ruth. "It isn't just, and one has a right to expect justice from one's form mistress." Grace Russell was a decided success as warden. She was not the cleverest girl in the upper fourth by any means, but she was one of the oldest, and she had a strong sense of duty. She kept the rules scrupulously herself, and discouraged all the shirkings that had come in under Hope's regime. It was wonderful how rapidly most of the girls responded to her influence, and how soon the form began to take a better tone. Hope was very quiet and subdued after her deposition, till one day she caught Dorothy in the dressing room. "You're a mean sneak, Dorothy Greenfield," she began hotly. "You promised on your honor you wouldn't tell Miss Tempest we'd been at the wedding, and yet you went and did it." "I didn't," declared Dorothy, with equal heat. "I kept my promise absolutely. I never told a single soul." "What's the quarrel?" said Margaret Parker. "Why, Dorothy had seen Blanche and me at that wretched wedding. I wish we'd never gone, and she promised she wouldn't tell, and then she must have done. I'm certain it was she." "It was Professor Schenk who told Miss Tempest," replied Margaret. "I know, because Beatrice Schenk said so." "Do you mean to say you let Dorothy own up about that business, and then expected her to keep quiet about your share of it? It's you who are the sneak." "Dorothy Tell, indeed. We know her better than that. She flies into rages, but she'd scorn to get anybody into trouble at headquarters. I think she's been a trump." The feeling of the form at present was decidedly in Dorothy's favor. Schoolgirl opinion veers round quickly, and a companion who is unpopular one week may be a heroine the next. Margaret Parker was so indignant at Hope's conduct that she published abroad the story of the promise, and the general verdict was that Dorothy had shown up very well in the affair. "I don't believe I'd have kept such a secret and let Hope get off scot-free," said Ruth Harmon, "especially when she was being so rude, but I'm not quixotic, so that makes the difference." After this the rehearsals in the gymnasium went on briskly. It was growing near Christmas, and there was still much to be done to perfect the performance. Dorothy threw herself with enthusiasm into the part of Becky Sharp. She did it to the life, and defied Miss Pinkerton with special zeal. "She does it almost too well. I wish Miss Tempest could see her," laughed Allison. "She's going to Sedmavie. She sent a message to say she'd like to come, and bring some of the mistresses." "Oh! Oh! Oh!" exclaimed the girls. The little play had only been intended to be acted before a select circle of day boarders, so the performers felt quite nervous at the idea of numbering Miss Tempest and the mistresses among their audience. "Mary Galloway's come." "Aren't you nervous, Dorothy?" whispered Ruth, greatly excited, for Mary was the president of the College Dramatic Union, and a critic of matters theatrical. Dorothy had got to a stage beyond nervousness. She felt as if she were going to execution. "I expect I shall spoil the whole thing, but it can't be helped," she replied resignedly. With the first sentences, however, her courage returned, and she played up splendidly. Her representation of Becky was so spirited that teachers and elder girls applauded loudly. "Very good indeed," commented Miss Tempest, when the act was over. "I had no idea you could all do so well." "I should like a word with Becky Sharp," said Mary Galloway, slipping behind the scenes and drawing that heroine aside. Dorothy returned from the whispered conference with shining eyes. "What is it?" "You're looking radiant," said Allison. I may well be. Mary Galloway's going to propose me as a member of the College Dramatic Union.